Here with me are political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and author and broadcaster, Emma Wolfe. So a very good morning to you and a very happy pre-Christmas Sunday to you both.
Is it too early?
I just sort of want to bring Christmas into it, get us in the right mood. Anyway, I'm sure that that mood might dissipate a little bit because some of the stories are quite serious, as you'd imagine, on the front of the papers. Emma, we're kicking off with a story on the front of the Sunday Times, and this is about what Wes Streeting has been saying about the NHS.
Yeah, I mean, he's been out and about. He's been visiting overstretched A&E departments. I'm not sure how helpful it is at this time with people in corridors, with having the health secretary coming to visit your hospital, but he has been out and about. He's been meeting patients and talking to staff in emergency departments. And he's been sort of looking at the state of A&E and the state of the NHS in terms of the hospitals and the A&E department. He met an elderly woman who'd spent 30 hours on a sort of trolley in a corridor. This kind of his statement about the NHS, he's saying it's broken, but it's not beaten. He says he feels a mixture of pride and shame at the state of the NHS. And this comes at a poll has just been released showing that only 31% now of the public are satisfied with the NHS. It's all-time low. It was 34% at its previous lowest point, which was just before the 97 Blair landslide election. So obviously the public are not happy, really, with the state of A&E. I feel like Wes Streeting has been really vocal and very intelligent about the state of primary care, secondary care, hospitals, A&E, but I'm not sure that he's giving us the answers. Yeah, he's talking about reform. He keeps saying what we need to do. Yesterday there was a story about GP surgeries, giving them £900 million in order to see more patients, in order that we all have a family doctor, have a named family doctor. Great ideas, all of them. Yes, our A&E and our hospitals are in a state, but what are the solutions? And is he going to get there?
Yeah, and with an ageing population, inevitably the demands are going to be greater and greater as well. Yeah. Kevin, do you feel that he's laying out enough of a kind of pathway to improvement?
I mean, he talks a good game, as you were alluding to. You know, he talks about reform. It can't all just be about more and more money, which I think everyone agrees with.
Although they have committed some more money, haven't they?
They have, an extra £10 billion in the budget, which I'm sure was very welcome, but he's yet to really set out what that reform would look like. We know, you mentioned Tony Blair, we know that under New Labour there was a lot more private involvement in the NHS, and I think people are fairly pragmatic when it comes to the NHS. You know, as long as it works and it's free at the point of delivery, then people really don't mind where it's actually come from.
Because there are some people that are worried about the use of private healthcare in the mix, aren't they? They're worried about privatisation of the NHS.
Yeah, I mean, it's always talked about, isn't it? Oh, don't sell off the NHS, or the Americans want to come in and buy up the NHS. But, you know, it's been warned about for many, many years, and it's never, ever happened, and it's certainly never going to happen under a Labour government, I would suggest.
And I think overwhelmingly, when you speak to people, patients, if they get seen, they don't mind whether they're going to be seen, as long as it's nearby, it's, you know, they can get there, it's not within 18-month wait to have your hip replaced. If people can be seen and, you know, as long as this is free and it is still the NHS to them, I don't think there is a huge ideological opposition to this.
No, if it's in an NHS hospital or it's in a private hospital, as long as you're not the one who's having to physically hand over a credit card, like they do have to do it in other countries, and I think people don't mind that. I think at the end of the day, the NHS is probably the area that this government is going to be judged on. You know, people expect Labour to improve the NHS. They did it the last time, and there's a lot of pressure on Wes Streeting to make sure that he can do it this time as well.
And they've always talked about it as being a key priority as well, so they've set themselves up to be judged on it too, haven't they?
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Mail on Sunday. Kevin, they've got a big front page focusing on charities and the impact that they say that they're having as a result of the budget.
Yeah, so this is the fallout again from the budget and the increase in employers' national insurance. So some analysis has been done about how much this is going to cost charities. Obviously, they're not exempt from having to pay this NI bill as employers themselves. Now, at the moment, it's something like 35% of the money that they receive from the public has to go towards the national insurance bill. You know, that is going to go up to 45%. So it's going to be £6.3 billion from a total of £13.9 billion. So I'm throwing a lot of figures at you here, but basically the public get hand over £13.9 billion. of that now, 6.3 billion will have to go straight to the taxman because of the increase in national insurance. That's 45%. And I think a lot of people will be thinking, you know, if they're chucking a few quid in a collection tin, or they've got a direct debit or whatever with Marie Curie or whatever charity it is, we'll be thinking, hang on a minute, I wasn't expecting as much as that to be going straight to the taxman. But I don't think there's any other option, really, because, you know, there's no way that the Chancellor is going to roll back on this because she's absolutely desperate for the cash herself.
Yeah, is there no kind of no kind of exemption for charities? I mean, it seems astonishing.
It does. I mean, at the moment, they already have to pay it. And I think this is, it's become such a big issue because it's gone up. And, yeah, we're talking about serious money here. Now, the charities have been lobbying government behind the scenes, obviously, to try and get some sort of exemption or some sort of carve-out to protect them from this rise. But the problem is, you do that, the money still has to come from somewhere else. So, so that's the problem. Really.
And of course, in the run-up to the election, the government were very keen to say there are certain areas that we're going to protect. You know, you're not going to have to pay higher national insurance as an employee.
As an employee.
And obviously now it's the employers that are footing the bill. And do you think that Labour felt, well, you know, obviously people don't like the idea of higher taxes, but if it's businesses paying, then maybe that'll go down better. But these exceptions people might find harder to stomach.
It's very complicated, isn't it? Because when you say business, that sounds a bit different to actually employers who are in the main, often quite small companies. Often, you know, they are working people too. It's this sort of slightly weasel words, isn't it? It's semantics, basically. They were pledging not to hit working people with higher taxes, but they do hit working people with higher taxes when working people are running a hairdressing salon and they're going to have to stump up more for national insurance contributions. So, you know, I think people would understand. But you're right, the money has to come from somewhere.
But you're right, people don't associate charities with employers and they don't associate GPs with employers, but those are groups that are going to have to see their tax bills go up and see why they're unhappy.
Let's take a look at the front page of the Sunday Telegraph,
Yeah.
Emma. Their headline is Net Zero Grocery Tax to Push Up Food Bills. So what is this grocery tax?
Well, it's actually, ministers have been accused of sort of quietly passing this legislation. It's a new grocery tax which should, I think, bring in around £1.4 billion. And it could add potentially around £56 a year to every household bill, to a shopping bill.
So explain what it applies to.
It's a tax on packaging. So it's a tax on packaging materials like plastic will be charged to the retailers and manufacturers, and they will pass on, and the government expects they will pass on 85 to 100% of this cost to consumers.
But presumably the incentive
families.
is to stop using plastic.
The incentive is stop using plastic. But this seems grossly
that's the alternative,
unfair.
isn't it? That manufacturers or retailers avoid using plastic, and then the cost, presumably, for the consumer would be...
Wonderful, yeah. And I think consumers overwhelmingly don't want more and more plastic.
Definitely
we all
not.
moan
Definitely
constantly about the layers of plastic and things being wired into things. You literally have to get scissors out to open the average or even a sort of packet of broccoli. We don't want plastic on things. If they use paper and cardboard, well, I think we would all be happy with the alternative. This comes at a time when consumers are facing rising food bills, rising inflation, second month in a row going up, and this cost, this large cost to retailers and manufacturers is going to be passed on to us. So, yes, hopefully that'll pressure them to switch to more eco-friendly packaging.
Well, yes, and I guess the consumer has choice. If there are alternatives without plastic packaging, you'd hope that they haven't got the increased costs because they're not paying the tax. Is the consumer definitely going to lose out here, do you think?
Well, potentially, yeah. I mean, as Emma says, you know, if they don't, you see this as an incentive to replace plastic with more eco-friendly packaging, then, yeah, I mean, it's not going to be the companies that absorb the cost that will be passed on to you and me. So hopefully this will be a nudge, as they would call it, in the right direction. I mean, I think you do already see less packaging. There's no doubt about it, but you still see too much.
But strangely, it's the more eco-friendly options. I'm thinking about lavatory paper. And those companies that send them out in lovely cardboard boxes in paper, much, much, much more expensive and probably more eco-friendly than the sort of cheapo plastic-covered versions in supermarkets. So it is more expensive often to go eco and to have the kind of lovely, kind of trendy cardboard paper options. So I don't think they've quite got the message yet. Maybe this grocery tax will focus the mind on cutting out plastic, which we do not want.
But people will notice if their weekly shopping bill goes up, and again, that's another cost of living crisis. crisis, and again, the government gets the blame for that.
And inflation, you know, maybe lower than it was, but price is still very high. We're out of time. We'll see you again in the next hour. Thanks both.
Thanks.